Welcome to Wonders of Worship. Has your parent or grandparent ever said to you, "Go wash your hands, it's time for dinner"? Now you're supposed to get rid of the dirt and germs before you sit down to dinner with everyone, right? I mean, you need to be clean, not just for your sake, but for the sake of the others and their health at the table, right? I'm sure that they have heard a million times, wear your mask and wash your hands for the sake of others. Now today I tell you a story that happened on Thursday of Holy Week, Jesus' last week on earth. It's supper time, and if you had been there, perhaps your parents might have said, "Go wash your feet. It's time for dinner." Now you're probably wondering, feet? What do my feet have to do with eating dinner? Don't I just have to wash my hands? And the answer to that would have been no. And that's because things were very different back in Jesus' day when he was in Jerusalem. Back then, people didn't wear socks and shoes like we do today. They wore sandals, and they walked everywhere. And the roads were dirty and the paths were dusty. You can just imagine how dirty your feet might be if you had been outside all day walking from place to place in your open-toed sandals. Now, let's say that you arrive at home and you stomp the dust off your feet and you enter through the door and you head for the table. I bet that your parents would have said, "Aren't you forgetting something? Go back, wash your feet, and then come sit down at the table." So you turn around and you walk to the big jar of water that is next to the door. And you pour some of that water into a basin, and then you wash your feet and probably your hands, and then you dry them with a towel. And then you're ready to go sit down at the table. Now this was important because you see, tables back then were very low to the ground, and people would sit maybe on a pillow on the ground and recline, kind of leaning on their elbow as they ate. Now that meant that sometimes when you were eating, somebody's feet would be right next to your hands. I mean, it would be on the same level. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you didn't wash your feet and you sat down next to me and your feet were close to where I was eating, I would not be a happy camper. In fact, I would think, how rude. So imagine that you are one of the 12 disciples invited not just to any supper, but a special Jewish holy meal called Passover. You walk in the door and there is no servant there to wash your feet. And you ignore the jar of water that's used to wash your feet. You go in and you sit down at the table ready to eat. Now Jesus enters and he stands at the table and he looks around and he sees that none of the disciples wash their feet. And then you watch as Jesus takes off his outer robe. He goes and he gets a basin of water and he puts a towel around his waist, and then he begins to wash the feet of each of the disciples, one by one. And then he dries them off with the towel. While you watch this, you are shocked to see Jesus, the VIP, which means very important person of the Passover meal, doing this lowly job of a servant. Shock turns into shame. You realize that all you have been to, you were too proud to wash your feet. You ignored this water jar as you walked in the door. Oh, now you're really embarrassed. I mean, because none of you have shown the common courtesy to wash your feet before dinner. Your parents taught you better than that. This was an act that was beyond poor manners. How rude. Peter, thoroughly humiliated, was the first one to say, "No, you cannot wash me. You cannot wash my feet." But Jesus said, "Peter, unless I wash you, you won't have a place with me." Jesus was using this act of serving to teach the disciples a lesson. He put his clothes back on and he sat down at the table, and Jesus said, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and that is correct. If I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you too must wash one another's feet. I have given you an example. Just as I have done, you also should do." In other words, you need to show others how much you love them by serving them. So make sure to wear your mask and wash your hands for the sake of others. Maybe send a thoughtful card to someone, or serve someone a meal, or pack some food for people that are hungry. I wonder what else that you will do for others, like Jesus taught you to do.